Hey guys, my name is Dice Rollin, and I have another original versus sequel review for you. This time I'll be reviewing The Woman in Black versus The Woman in Black 2. I saw The Woman in Black shortly after it first came out and was pleasantly surprised by how fear and scary elements were handled in the movie. So, the question, as always, is does the sequel stack up to the original? And ultimately, which is better? So without further ado, this is my original versus sequel review of The Woman in Black versus The Woman in Black 2. The first film was directed by James Watkins and came out in 2012. It also stars Daniel Radcliffe as the main character, Arthur Kipps, who is a widowed lawyer still going through the grief of losing his wife during the birth of his son. Arthur is sent to a remote village, specifically the Eel Marsh House, to sort out the affairs and legal specifications of the deceased owner. However, he starts to realize that things aren't quite right in the town by how the people living there act around him, particularly when he mentions where he's staying. After he arrives at the decrepit house, Arthur begins to experience some odd things, including fleeting glimpses of the ghost of its former owner. It doesn't take very long for the local children to start dying of different causes, but the parents firmly believe that the woman in black is to blame, and subsequently it's Arthur's fault for stirring this all up. So, some of the fathers attempt to drive Arthur away, but this doesn't work, and he continues digging up clues about this mysterious woman that the people are so afraid of. He finds that the woman in black, also known as Jeanette Humphrey, had a sister who took her son Nathaniel away from her as she was deemed mentally unfit to raise him. However, Arthur also discovers a death certificate that shows Nathaniel died by drowning in the marsh outside the house. Thus, Jeanette blamed her sister for his death. Eventually, Arthur realizes that his son Joseph will be the woman in black's next victim, as he would be arriving in town very soon. So, he and Sam Daly literally drag Nathaniel's body out of the marsh and into the nursery to lure Jeanette. This works, and they bury Nathaniel with his mother before going to the train station to greet Joseph. Unfortunately for Arthur, Jeanette isn't that easily pacified and lures Joseph out in front of the oncoming train. Arthur attempts to save him, but isn't quite quick enough as they both are hit. The movie ends with Arthur and Joseph reuniting with Arthur's dead wife in the afterlife, while the woman in black stares menacingly at the audience. I think that's about as close as one could come to a happy ending in a horror movie. The sequel was directed by Tom Harper and was released in 2015. It takes place in 1941 during World War II, which forces many children, some orphaned, to leave to a safer place with two caretakers, Eve and Jean. During the train ride, we are also introduced to Harry, who is apparently a bomber pilot with the same destination as the group. When they arrive at the village, they find that everyone seems to have disappeared, except for this guy. So they arrive at the Marsh House, and it's been years since anyone has been there. But they seem to have worked out electricity, which is nice. Eve has a nightmare, and the next day, Edward is picked on by a couple of boys, which leads to the woman in black singling him out to talk to. Then she offs one of the boys that picked on him by means of barbed wire. Eve takes a walk through the graveyard and spots the woman in black, which leads her to experience the accident that happened in the marsh by way of hearing it in the fog, much like Arthur did in the first movie. Eve and Harry return to the house and take a look around the basement, where Eve finds a key, and Harry listens to a recording from the woman in black's sister. Eve then goes to the village and finds that the key goes to a lockbox full of things from the woman in black. So technically, everything Arthur had gathered up during his visit comes in handy for Eve. And then creepy guy shows up and acts creepy. Meanwhile, the woman in black tries to collect kid number 2, but Jean finds the girl before that can happen. Death by yarn is a terrible way to go, especially if you're allergic to wool. Eve and Harry return to Eel Marsh just in time for a bombing, and everyone gathers down in the basement. Once again, the woman in black pulls another girl away from the group and causes her to suffocate herself in a rather different way than the previous attempt. This convinces Jean that there is indeed something off about the house, and Harry takes them to the airbase, which turns out to be a decoy for the Nazis. So they all spend some time underground until the woman in black decides to taunt them. But there's an easy way to keep her from making you off yourself, and it's the old, if I can't see it, it won't hurt me technique. This works till Jean opens her eyes and promptly freaks the fuck out at the sight of the woman in black herself. Eve gets knocked unconscious, and Edward flees outside with Harry chasing after him. Harry gets traumatized by the ghost of the boy who was killed, and Edward appears to jump into one of the fire baskets. The next morning, while everyone is leaving, Eve figures out that she has to go back to the Eel Marsh house through Edward's drawing. Once she gets there, we're subjected to more creepiness until she's locked into the nursery to watch Edward die, just like Janet had with her son. However, Eve breaks through the floor and goes after Edward, only for the both of them to be pulled down by what I can only assume are the same zombie things from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Harry appears and saves both of them, even though he sacrifices himself. And they all live happily ever after. Except for Harry and those other kids. And that was The Woman in Black and The Woman in Black 2. So, which one was better? In a genre that's quite literally soaked in blood and gore, it's refreshing to come across some that aren't. Movies that rely more on building an intense and creepy atmosphere, rather than cutting characters down with a chainsaw or ripping them apart from the inside. Speaking of characters, that's pretty damn important to make any movie work well. Both movies have a protagonist that is relatively easy to sympathize with, and I thought it was cool to have both a male and female take on the same location against the same antagonist. With that being said, both movies had a good plot and good characters. But for The Woman in Black and The Woman in Black 2, I think the original did a better job in the long run. It was creepier and more suspenseful than the sequel, and I believe a big reason for that is because Arthur Kipps was alone. Thus, the audience felt more of that sense of isolation. In the sequel, no one was really surrounded, and they were just as cut off as Arthur was, but at the same time, they weren't alone. There were quite a few of them. Plus, the original left us as an audience just as out of sorts and caught off guard as Arthur was. So, that was my original versus sequel review of The Woman in Black versus The Woman in Black 2, Angel of Death. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like to let me know. And don't forget to leave a comment down below. Which movie did you think was better? And do you have any suggestions for my next review? Also, don't forget to share this video to help the channel grow and subscribe for more videos like this. See you later.